I didn't want to open the door. I already knew the voice on the other side didn't belong to anything living, but hearing it, the softness, the tremble, the exact same way she used to say my name shook something in me I thought was buried for good. It was Marissa's voice. My wife. My dead wife. "Ethan, please," she whispered, her breath brushing against the cracks of the wood like she was leaning right into it. It was pitch dark outside. No moon, no stars. Just the cabin's weak porch light, trembling against the blackness like it was fighting for its life. And in that trembling light, I could see the faintest outline of someone standing there, shoulders slumped, head tilted, waiting. My heart beat so hard it hurt. I didn't move. Couldn't move. Not when she said my name again, this time with that gentle impatience she used whenever I stopped listening. "Ethan, sweetheart, it's really me." I wasn't breathing. I don't think I even blinked. I wanted so desperately for it to be her. I wanted to swing the door open, pull her in, and tell her everything I hadn't gotten to say the night she died. But there was something in her tone, a slight distortion, like two voices layered one on top of the other, that paralyzed me. And then she giggled. That did it. Because Marissa never giggled like that. Not once in the 8 years we were together. Not like a child trying to imitate a grown woman. Not like something rehearsing human emotion. That sound crawled under my skin, cold and wrong. "Ethan," she crooned, "it's freezing out here. Let me inside." She dragged the last word, stretching it longer than a person should be able to. As if her mouth didn't know when to stop. My throat tightened. My hand hovered over the deadbolt, and the longer I hesitated, the more the shape outside leaned forward, its shadow stretching across the porch in one unnatural pull. I stumbled backward. A deep breath burned through my chest. There was no pretending anymore. Not after that sound. Not after how the thing outside mimicked a memory too perfectly. Not after it pressed its forehead gently against the door, making the wood thump with each slow exhale. "Open the door, Ethan." I shut my eyes, covering my ears like a coward, but her voice didn't fade. It grew clearer, closer, as if it were weaving itself around me, trying to slip under my skin. "Open the door. Please." The porch light flickered. Once, twice. Then the thing outside stopped pretending. The voice cracked open, split wide. "Let me in." It wasn't Marissa anymore. It wasn't human. The scream rattled the windows, made dust fall from the rafters, made the boards beneath my feet tremble. I staggered away from the door, clutching my chest like my heart wanted out. In that instant, I realized something with brutal clarity. Whatever was outside, wearing my wife's voice, didn't want shelter. It wanted me. I don't remember collapsing onto the floor, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, I was staring up at the ceiling beams, still shaking. The air felt heavier than before. The whole cabin seemed to be holding its breath, waiting. That's when the footsteps began. Slow, deliberate, directly above me. The attic. I didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't dare look at the ceiling. Just the sound of quiet, measured pacing, back and forth, like someone or something was deciding what to do with me. That was the moment I finally understood I wasn't dealing with a nightmare. Wasn't dealing with stress or grief or imagination. No, I had inherited something I wasn't prepared for. And God help me, something inside that attic was preparing for me. If you're still here with me, if your heart's already pumping and you want to hear the full truth of what happened in that cabin, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I've got so much more to tell you, and your support keeps me going through stories like this. Now let me take you back to where everything began, before the voices, before the footsteps, before the cabin tried to swallow my name whole. It started with a letter. A plain, ugly manila envelope that arrived on a Tuesday that was already falling apart before it even started. I remember that morning too well. The coffee tasted burnt, bitter enough to make me grimace. The shower barely warmed up. Traffic was slow, crawling through the city like it had given up trying. I'd already written the day off as cursed when the doorbell rang. The courier stood there, shifting his weight like he didn't want to be inside the building for longer than absolutely necessary. He checked the address, his eyes darting behind him as if expecting someone to follow. "Ethan Morales?" he asked. I nodded. He thrust his tablet forward, practically begging me to sign. His hand shook while holding it. "Rough morning?" I asked. He didn't laugh, didn't even smile, just swallowed hard. "I'm not supposed to say anything," he murmured, "but good luck." Good luck? Before I could ask what that meant, he pushed a thick manila envelope against my chest and hurried down the hallway so fast he nearly tripped. The elevator doors shut before I could even step forward. I stared at the envelope. No return address. Just my name, printed neatly on a white label. Inside was a stack of legal documents with a firm's letterhead, Howden Wilcox and Associates, Vancouver, British Columbia. The last place I expected to see printed on anything related to me. And then the name I didn't recognize. Gabriel Morales, an uncle I never knew existed. A man who apparently left me his entire property, a remote cabin on 10 acres of forest in northern British Columbia. My first thought? This had to be a mistake. I didn't know anyone from Canada. My father never mentioned a brother. My mother never talked about any relatives up north. But the documents were real. The numbers, the signatures, everything pointed to this being legitimate. I rubbed my temples and called the firm, expecting them to tell me they'd confused me with some other Morales. Instead, the receptionist's voice was warm but strangely rehearsed. "Mr. Morales, Mr. Wilcox has been expecting your call. Can you come to our office tomorrow morning?" Expecting my call? I hadn't even known this envelope existed until 10 minutes ago. Still, something tugged at me. Curiosity, I guessed. A desire for anything that might break the monotony my life had become after losing Marissa. I took the next day off work and booked a last-minute flight to Vancouver. The law office smelled like cedar and lemon polish. Everything was too perfectly arranged, like someone curated every detail to appear successful. Mr. Wilcox himself was thin, pale, with wire-framed glasses that slid down his nose every few minutes. He gestured for me to sit. "Your uncle," he began, "was an extraordinary man. Reclusive, yes, but meticulous. He left very specific instructions." "I didn't know I had an uncle," I replied. "You did," he said, "and now his legacy belongs to you." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a keyring with 3 old-fashioned keys. "One for the front door," he said, "one for the back, and one for a door he didn't specify." I frowned. "And if I don't want it?" Wilcox gave me a look I couldn't read. "You'll want to see it first," he said. Your uncle insisted. Then he handed me a sealed envelope. My name scrawled on it in trembling handwriting. "Open it only once you arrive," he said. I don't know why, but my stomach tightened. Something in his tone made the room feel smaller. 2 days later, I was driving a rental car away from Vancouver toward dense stretches of forest that swallowed the sky. The pavement disappeared first, replaced by gravel, then dirt, then something that barely qualified as a road. My GPS lost signal an hour in, leaving me to navigate using printed coordinates. Every mile farther from civilization chipped away at my confidence. The woods pressed close, tall and dark, and whispering with wind that didn't feel natural. Just when I thought I'd taken a wrong turn, the trees parted, and the cabin appeared like it had been waiting for me. Built from dark timber. Steep roof, wrap-around porch, stone chimney stretching upward like a warning finger. It was old, yes, but solid. Impossibly solid. A place built to survive storms, physical or otherwise. I stepped out of the car, stretching my aching back, and felt something I couldn't explain. The air was still, too still. No birds, no insects, no rustling in the brush. Just wind whistling through the evergreens like the forest was exhaling a secret. I unlocked the door. The key slid in too smoothly. Inside, it smelled faintly of pine and old books. Everything was clean. Too clean. Someone had taken care of this place. Recently, I dropped my bag and pulled out the sealed envelope. The handwriting wobbled across the page like someone writing through pain. To Ethan Morales, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and the burden is now yours. I laughed. Burden? What burden? The next line stole the breath from my lungs. You must follow the rules if you want to survive. I read that line again. Follow the rules if you want to survive. It didn't fit the tone of everything else, the legal documents, the inheritance, the carefully organized estate folder. This wasn't the kind of message a man struggling through illness left behind. This was something else entirely. Something written under pressure, under fear, and the deeper I read, the clearer that fear became. Rule 1. Stay inside after dark, no matter what you hear, no matter who calls your name. Rule 2. Never enter the attic. The door must remain locked. Ignore footsteps. Rule 3. Keep the basement door locked at all times. If it opens on its own, leave the house immediately unless it's dark. Rule 4. If anyone claims to be Gabriel Morales, do not believe them. I am dead. Anything wearing my face is not me. I stared at the last line for a long time, tracing the shaky pen strokes with my eyes. The handwriting dipped and rose like waves crashing against each other, frantic and uneven. This is insane, I muttered to no one. But a strange heaviness settled into the room, like something unseen was waiting for my reaction. I pulled a magnet off the fridge and stuck the paper there, where it seemed almost absurdly harmless between a faded grocery list and a national park postcard. This had to be the ramblings of a man dying alone in the forest. A symptom of isolation, delusion, fear. That was what I told myself. But something about that final rule, the warning not to trust anyone wearing his face, gnawed at me. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the tone behind them. Like he'd written the sentence in one final burst of clarity, pouring everything he had left into that single instruction. I explored the cabin to distract myself. The bedroom smelled faintly of cedar and old linen. The sheets were clean but musty, like they'd been aired out but not used. A photograph on the nightstand caught my attention. Gabriel standing in the clearing, much younger, smiling at something out of frame. His eyes were the same shape as mine, dark, deep-set, weighted with thought. Only his were softer, kinder. Mine belonged to someone who'd lost too much. The bathroom was simple, functional. The kitchen cupboards stocked with canned food, noodles, dried beans, the basics of a survivalist. Whoever lived here planned to stay put. But the attic door at the top of the staircase, that was different. Thick, heavy, with a lock that looked older than the cabin itself. When I tried my keys, none fit. Something about that made me feel both relieved and subtly unnerved. It wasn't the attic's silence that bothered me. It was the idea that silence might not be the truth. The basement door was in the hallway, near the living room. Solid, reinforced, too solid for a casual cabin. I touched the knob. It was cold, icy even, like it hadn't been touched in years. I tried the basement key. This lock accepted it. The hinges groaned as the door opened to a dim stairwell. I clicked the light switch out of habit. The bulb flickered to life. A concrete floor, tool shelves, storage boxes, normal. Completely normal. But something about stepping 1 foot onto the top stair made my breath hitch. A pressure shifted in the air. Not tangible, not visible, but present, watching, waiting. I backed up and closed the door. The lock clicked home. A small relief. Still, the sensation clung to me, like invisible static dancing beneath my skin. By late afternoon, shadows stretched long across the clearing. The sun dipped behind the treetops earlier than I expected, and the temperature dropped fast. The stillness outside gathered like a living thing. I stepped onto the porch with a beer, hoping the crisp air would settle my nerves. The silence was thick, heavy. I'd grown up around forests in Washington state. Nature was never this quiet. There should have been birds, squirrels, crickets, breeze rustling leaves. Something. But there was nothing. Just the distant hum of wind winding through the evergreens like a secret being whispered over and over. The beer tasted sour, My fingers trembled slightly around the bottle. I blamed the long drive, the lack of sleep, the shock from the letter. That made sense. That was rational. A twig snapped in the tree line. I jolted, turning toward the sound. The trees were a solid wall of black-green, shifting with each breath of wind, concealing everything just beyond sight. "Hello?" I forced out. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then another snap. Closer. I set the bottle down and took one step backward toward the door. The air changed colder, tighter, as if something had drawn the heat inward. The kind of temperature shift you feel when a thunderstorm is about to break open above your head. A warning from the sky. The sun slipped beneath the horizon in a blink, the clearing drowning in sudden dark. My instinct screamed to step inside, to lock the door, to turn on every light. Instead, I froze. A soft laugh drifted from the trees. A familiar laugh, one I hadn't heard in 3 years. Marissa. My chest constricted. My stomach dropped. For a second, the clearing spun around me. It couldn't be her. It wasn't possible. She died in a car accident on a rain-slick highway. I was the one who identified her body. I was the one who picked out the urn. "Ethan?" her voice called. "Where are you?" Every hair on my arms stood straight up. It wasn't her. It couldn't be her. But the voice was identical. Same cadence, same warmth, same delicate breathy tone that only came out when she was trying to coax me into something. My mind scrambled for explanation, grief, hallucination, stress-induced memory, echo from the past. But echoing memories didn't step closer, didn't crack another branch, didn't call your name again, softer this time, as if stepping barefoot through the forest. I moved backward until my hand found the doorknob. The porch light buzzed violently above me, threatening to die. The voice came again, closer now, right at the edge of the trees. "Ethan, why are you hiding?" I slammed the door shut and locked it. My chest heaved. Sweat prickled my hairline. I backed up until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. A second later, something touched the outside of the door. A gentle drumming. Fingertips, tracing the outline of the frame. "Let me in," Marissa whispered, her breath threading through the cracks. "Please. I'm cold." I pressed a fist to my mouth to hold back the sound rising from my throat. Then she giggled high, wrong, stretched too thin. The doorknob twitched. I stumbled toward the kitchen, grabbing the rules off the fridge with trembling fingers. My eyes darted down the page. Rule 1 stung like a slap. Stay inside after dark, no matter who calls your name. I backed into the living room, pacing in frantic circles, whispering to myself like a mantra. "It's not her. It's not her. It's not her." A sudden pounding on the door made me jump. The wood shook. Something dragged its nails down the frame, long and slow, like carving its patience into the grain. I shouted, "Go away." The cabin swallowed my voice whole. Not even an echo. That was when I heard footsteps overhead. A single step, then another. Deliberate, measured, heavy enough to make the ceiling creak. The attic. My breath caught. My eyes widened. My entire body locked in place. Rule 2. Never enter the attic. Ignore footsteps. I stared upward, unable to move or think, listening as the pacing continued above me. Back and forth, pausing now and then, like whoever or whatever walked above was listening for my reaction. The pounding at the front door stopped. Silence. The attic footsteps paused directly over my head, as if the creature sensed my frozen terror and leaned down to savor the moment. The cabin felt smaller, tighter, shrinking around me. Even the air seemed afraid to move. "Ethan," a voice whispered from the attic floorboards, muffled but unmistakably real. It wasn't Marissa. It wasn't Gabriel. It was something else entirely. Something I didn't recognize. A voice with no memory attached. I stumbled backward until my legs hit the couch, collapsing onto it with a dry sob clawing its way from my lungs. I stayed there for hours, maybe, listening to the pacing, the whispering, the occasional thump against the attic walls. The sounds moved like a living storm above my head, At some point, exhaustion dragged me into a shallow, restless sleep. When sunlight finally broke through the windows, I woke up stiff, cold, and drenched in sweat. The cabin was quiet again. Morning light softened everything, made the wood glow, dust dance in warm beams. For one peaceful heartbeat, I convinced myself I dreamt the entire night. Then I stepped onto the porch and saw the prints. They stretched across the wooden boards, thin, elongated impressions in the frost. Too long to be human, too narrow to be any animal I recognized. Each one ending in what looked like tapered points, almost like claws. They led straight to the front door and stopped there. I knelt down, fingertips trembling as I brushed the closest one. The frost melted instantly beneath my touch, and with it, the print vanished, like it had never existed at all. A cold shiver rolled through me. My breath fogged out in front of my face. Something ancient and instinctive whispered through my bones. Something came here last night, and it wasn't done with me. I stood slowly, gripping the porch railing as a steadying anchor, staring out into the endless line of evergreen. The forest looked the same as the day before, but it felt different, like something inside it now watched me with hungry interest. I didn't know it then, but I would come to understand this truth in the days ahead. I hadn't inherited a cabin. I had inherited a prison, and the prisoner was tired of being alone. I stood on the porch far longer than I should have, staring at the frost where the prints used to be. The morning light washed over the clearing, warming nothing, illuminating everything. Every part of me kept whispering the same thought. Leave. Just leave. Hike out. Run. Do anything but stay here another minute. But another thought lingered, buried somewhere in the back of my mind like a splinter I couldn't shake free. If the prince vanished on touch, what else could vanish? What else could pretend to be something it wasn't? The idea worked through me like ice water. If the thing outside could mimic Marissa's voice, what else could it do? I needed answers. Answers only one place in this whole cursed clearing might have. The basement, not the attic, not after what I heard last night. The attic felt like holding a hot wire with bare hands. One wrong move and everything would snap. But the basement felt like a door, a locked one, a place where secrets might be shoved into corners like old furniture. A place where a man like Gabriel might lay out the truth he couldn't say out loud. I turned back toward the cabin. Inside, the air felt different. Lighter, but only on the surface. Like putting on a clean shirt over skin slicked with sweat. I took one slow breath and walked toward the basement door. The cold metal of the doorknob made me flinch. For a moment, I hesitated. My pulse thudded in my neck. The rule echoed through my head like a warning bell. Keep the basement door locked. If it opens by itself, leave immediately. But it hadn't opened by itself. I was choosing this. I was walking in willingly. And somehow God knows why I trusted that the rules mattered. Not the tone, not the fear behind them, but the precision. They gave boundaries to something boundless. The key slid into the lock with a soft metallic click. I opened the door. The light at the top of the stairwell flickered on, humming faintly. The steps creaked beneath my weight as I descended. The air felt thick, colder than the rest of the cabin. A subtle pressure closed in around my ribs, not enough to hurt, but enough to make me aware that I was entering someplace different, somewhere not entirely benign. The basement itself was bigger than I'd realized. Wider, deeper. Stone walls met concrete floors, shelves lined with tools and jars and boxes. Nothing looked out of place. Nothing looked disturbed. But something atmospheric, the feeling of being watched without eyes, of walking into a memory that wasn't mine, kept me on edge. My flashlight illuminated a corner I hadn't explored last night. A desk sat against the far wall, and stacked on top of it were dozens of notebooks, leather-bound, worn at the edges, arranged chronologically, each with a date marked on the spine. I approached slowly, drawn to them the way a starving man might approach food. Something inside me buzzed. A warning or an invitation, I couldn't tell. The earliest journal was from 1983. The most recent ended only months ago. The handwriting was unmistakable, the same shaky, uneven scrawl as the letter left for me. My heart thudded. I picked up the newest journal, flipped to a random page, and froze. April 17th. They're getting more aggressive. Last night, something wearing Sarah's face pressed against the bedroom window for hours. I tried not to look, but her voice, God, her voice was too close. I couldn't sleep with her watching me. When dawn came, the windows were covered in handprints, but they weren't hers. They weren't human. My throat tightened as I read the next few lines. Her eyes were wrong, too wide, too dark, and when she smiled, something cracked in her jaw. I forced myself to turn the page. May 2nd. The basement opened again tonight. I heard them on the stairs, whispering, laughing. They only laugh when they're close, when they think they're winning. I had to choose. I always choose the attic. Better the devil you know. I stopped there. The words, choose the attic, stung me like a wasp. Why choose the attic? Why face whatever was pacing up there? Why not choose the basement instead? I turned more pages. Every entry described something different. A face in the window that had been dead for decades. A voice that spoke from beneath the floorboards. A shadow stretching its fingers around a doorframe. Each incident seemed to test him, probe his boundaries, learn his weaknesses. The cabin wasn't just a house, it was a cage, and Gabriel was never the warden. He was the guard assigned a shift he couldn't refuse. One entry, written in darker ink as if penned under urgency, stopped me cold. June 11th. The cabin chooses its guardian through blood. You cannot leave unless it allows it, unless another stands where you stand now. A chill scraped down my spine. Another entry read, June 19th. It hunted my father the same way, made him see things, hear things. He told me the rules were the only reason he survived. I didn't understand him, but I do now. God help me, I do now. And then, the next line, I hope Ethan never comes here. I hope he never reads this. I stepped back from the journal, heart kicking the inside of my chest like it wanted out. My breath quickened, my vision blurred. Why me? Why this cabin? Why did I have to inherit a nightmare I didn't even know existed? But beneath all that panic, something else grew. Something I didn't expect. Anger. Anger that Gabriel didn't warn me sooner. Anger that he left me a legacy soaked in terror. Anger that my life had already been reduced to ashes once, and now the forest itself wanted the rest. I grabbed the journal and headed back upstairs. Inside the cabin, everything seemed too quiet again. I checked the windows, locked. Checked the back door, locked. Checked the front door, still splintered from last night's pounding, but closed. Then I checked my phone. Still no signal, not even a flicker. The rational part of me needed something productive to do, something that didn't involve collapsing under fear, so I decided to check the car. If I could just get it running, just get out long enough to reach a ranger station or any sign of human life, maybe this whole nightmare would snap under the weight of normalcy. I walked outside. The cold morning air slapped my face awake. The clearing felt deceptively peaceful, sunlight trickling through the trees like warm honey. It was almost enough to imagine the night before had been a hallucination born of fatigue. Almost. I popped the hood of the rental car. The engine looked untouched. Battery clean, terminals tight, nothing visibly wrong. I tried starting it again. Nothing. Not even a click. Come on, I muttered, jostling a few components I recognized. You worked fine yesterday. I tugged at a cable. Pressed the battery connections tighter. Slapped the side of the car out of frustration. When I looked up, I saw something, or thought I did, in the faint reflection of the windshield. A tall, blurred silhouette standing directly behind me. Not moving, not breathing. My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun around. No one was there. The clearing was empty. The trees stood motionless. I stepped back, suddenly aware of how loud my breathing was. The woods seemed to muffle everything else. Even the wind felt quieter. I needed tools, real tools. Something to test the battery, something to check the wiring, and that meant going back to the basement. A place I wasn't sure I ever wanted to step into again. Inside the cabin, the air felt heavier, like the walls were leaning in by an inch or two. I moved through cautiously, grabbing a flashlight and making my way back to the basement door. This time, when I opened it, the air rushed past me like cold breath. I told myself it was pressure difference. Old cabins shift air, wind under floorboards, rational explanations. But then why did it smell like damp stone and something metallic, something like rust or blood? I swallowed hard and descended. With each step, my pulse throbbed harder in my neck. The basement felt different now. Not larger or smaller, just aware. Like it remembered I'd left too fast last time. Like it wanted to see what I'd do now. I grabbed a few tools from the wall. Wrenches, screwdrivers, a voltmeter. I was about to race back upstairs when something caught my eye. A corner of the basement I hadn't fully explored. A place where the shadows clung thicker. Where a heavy wooden door stood partially hidden behind boxes. I hadn't noticed it before. It wasn't there before. I approached cautiously. The wood was old, reinforced with iron bands across the front. The hinges looked hand-forged. The handle was cold, colder than the basement air. A chill washed over me. This wasn't just a storage room. It felt older than the cabin itself. Older than the forest. I touched the handle. It didn't budge. Something inside me whispered a warning. Not now, not yet. That door was a line I wasn't ready to cross. The feeling was primal, instinctive, enough to make me back away and hurry upstairs. Back in the main cabin, sunlight streamed through the windows. I checked the tools. The air felt less oppressive, but the cabin never felt safe. Just awake, watching. I tried the car again. No progress. I spent nearly an hour troubleshooting everything I could, checking the battery and testing connections. Nothing made sense. The car wasn't dead, it was rejecting the idea of turning on, like something deprived it of permission. By mid-afternoon, frustration gnawed at me. My shoulders ached, my hands were scraped and dirty. I walked back inside, exhausted and irritated. The moment I stepped through the doorway, the weight of the cabin settled onto me again. It didn't want me to leave. I dropped the tools onto the table, rubbing my eyes. My thoughts spun in frantic loops. The forest, the voices, the attic, the prince. All of it tangled together in a knot that tightened the more I fought it. I paced the length of the living room, whispering to myself, there has to be a way out of here. There has to be. A sudden creak behind me made me jump. The basement door. I turned slowly. The door was closed. The lock was in place. But the chair I'd wedged under the handle last night lay on its side on the floor. My teeth clenched. Something had moved it. Something had tested the lock. Something new I was watching. I stared at the basement door for a long time, waiting for it to move again, waiting for the knob to twitch, or for another creak or whisper to slip from beneath the threshold. But the house stayed painfully silent, the kind of silence that felt deliberate, like the cabin chose when and how to breathe. My pulse thudded in my ears. A heavy, anchoring dread pressed into my stomach. The cabin wasn't merely haunted. It wasn't just alive. It was aware. I stepped back from the basement door, each movement slow and cautious. I didn't want to provoke whatever was on the other side. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the truth forming in my mind like frost on a window. This place wasn't trying to kill me. Not exactly. It was trying to shape me, break me down, remake me into something it needed. A guardian. The thought made my throat tighten. The journal entries were no longer just strange musings from a dying man, they were survival notes from someone forced into the same role I was being pulled toward. Guardians don't run. Guardians don't escape. Guardians stay. Guardians obey. My stomach turned. No, I whispered, clenching my fists. I'm not living like this. The urge to flee overwhelmed me. I grabbed my coat from the hook near the door and threw my pack over my shoulder. I didn't care if the car didn't start. I didn't care about the distance to the nearest road. I didn't care about the legends or guardian bloodlines or rules left by a man who never had the courage to contact me while he was alive. I needed out now. I stepped outside. The afternoon sun looked deceptively warm, gleaming across the clearing with a picture-perfect serenity that mocked the chaos inside my head. I found the trail Gabriel's directions had mentioned, a narrow footpath leading into the woods, easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. The kind of path that suggested it wasn't meant to be found. I walked fast, my boots crunching across frost-tipped grass. Every instinct in my body screamed for distance, for movement, for escape. Trees tightened around me as I entered the forest, branches filtering the light into pale stripes across the ground. I kept my eyes ahead, avoiding the shadows where sunlight didn't quite reach. After maybe 20 minutes, I paused to catch my breath. The air tasted clean and cold. No echoes, no footsteps, no whispers. For the first time all day, I let myself relax just a little. Then I noticed something that made my chest tighten. A broken branch on the ground, perfectly split down the center, the same way I'd seen earlier near the cabin. Coincidence? I whispered. Just a coincidence. But the forest disagreed. Another branch farther ahead identical. The trees didn't just look familiar. They looked exactly the same as the ones near the clearing. The same slender birch, leaning at an angle. The same stump with moss spreading in a crescent shape. I froze, staring hard at the landscape as though willing it to change. No, I whispered. No, this isn't possible. I spun around, scanning for landmarks. Every patch of forest looked frustratingly similar, but I'd walked in a straight line. I knew I had. I'd followed the sun's direction. I'd kept my bearings, but the trail ahead curved slightly left. The trail behind me curved slightly right. A slow, sickening realization settled into my bones. The forest wasn't letting me leave. I continued walking anyway. Not fast, not frantic. Just steady, determined, refusing to give in to panic. The deeper I went, the more the air shifted. Everything felt just a little off, like a dream where the rules of geometry had come loose. After another 20 minutes, I stepped over a fallen tree, pushed past a dense cluster of evergreens, and stopped dead. The clearing lay in front of me. The cabin stood exactly where I'd left it, still, waiting. I stood frozen, disbelief draining all the warmth from my body. My breath came out in shallow, shaky bursts. How? I whispered to no one. No answer came. Not from the wind, not from the woods, not from the thing pacing above the attic boards. The cabin didn't need to answer. Its message was simple. You belong here. I forced myself back inside, my hands trembling as I shut the broken door behind me. Safety wasn't real here, but walls felt better than open woods. False protection was still protection. The sun had dipped low outside, closer to evening now. Only a few hours until dark. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. I had prepared supplies. I had planned to escape. I had tried. And still, I was dragged back as easily as a leaf caught in a whirlpool. There was no denying it now. The rules weren't suggestions. They were laws. And the cabin enforced them. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. A deep, exhausted frustration flooded me. Not fear. Not exactly. It was the kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting something too big to see clearly. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't built for this. I didn't ask for this. But the cabin didn't care. When my breathing finally slowed, I reached for one of Gabriel's older journals. I needed clarity, guidance, maybe even hope, if such a thing existed here. The journal crackled when I opened it, the old leather dry and stiff. June 1989. If you're reading this, then you've tried to leave. We all do, once, only once. When the forest brings you back, you'll feel something you can't name. It's not fear. It's not anger. It's surrender. Don't let it swallow you. My chest tightened. There was more. The cabin knows how to break you. It will use your memories, your losses, your regrets. It wears their faces because it knows you'll listen. It uses their voices because it knows you'll believe just for a second that you're not alone. I shut the journal abruptly. Something inside me was unraveling, and I couldn't let it come loose. I needed to stay anchored. I needed to keep my mind intact. I needed to survive the night. The sun was close to the horizon now, bleeding orange through the windows. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and thin, reaching toward the walls like fingers. I moved through the cabin, double-checking locks, ensuring windows were secured. I braced the basement door with a heavy dresser this time. I knew it wouldn't stop anything determined, but I cared less about stopping something and more about slowing it. Buying myself seconds. Seconds might be the difference between surviving until dawn or disappearing into those woods forever. I prepared dinner, simple canned soup. The clatter of the spoon against the pot sounded painfully loud. I forced myself to eat, knowing I'd need strength. Fear burns calories faster than effort. Night arrived in stages. First came the cooling air, then the shifting light, then the silence, absolute and unnatural. The cabin felt like it was holding its breath. And then the knocking came, 3 soft taps at the door. My entire body tensed. Not again, not tonight, not now. Ethan. A voice called gently through the door. My heart stopped. It was my sister's voice, Claire. I hadn't heard her voice in years, not since she died. The grief was still sharp, still aching, still buried in places I'd never healed. Hearing her now felt like reopening every wound at once. Ethan, please, she whispered. It's cold, let me in. Her tone was soft, pleading, trembling the way it used to when she was scared as a kid. It hit me so hard I nearly staggered. Don't open the door. Don't believe the voices. I backed away from the door, shaking my head. No, I whispered. You're not her, Ethan. The voice cracked. Are you really going to leave me out here? Alone? My jaw clenched. Guilt washed over me in a massive, crushing wave. Guilt so heavy it almost pulled me forward, because I had left her alone. I'd left her in ways I couldn't fix. I wasn't there when she died. I wasn't there when she needed help most. Every word from the voice stabbed deep into that old wound. But the journals had been clear. The cabin uses your pain against you. I pressed my hands over my ears, but her voice seeped through the cracks between my fingers, threading into my skull, each word perfect, familiar, true. Ethan, please, I need you. My vision blurred. My knees felt weak. I can see you, the voice said suddenly. I froze. My blood ran cold. Every muscle in my body locked. Slowly, shaking, I turned toward the front window. The curtains were closed. The voice couldn't see anything, unless it wasn't looking with eyes. Unless it didn't need to. Stop, I whispered. Just stop. Please, Ethan, it murmured. Let me come home. The voice wavered, then twisted, deepened, stretched into something inhuman, something ancient, something hungry. Let me in. The words slammed into the door so hard the wood shook. The lights flickered. My pulse shot into my throat. I stumbled back, breath ragged. My hands trembled uncontrollably. Every instinct screamed to run, hide, scream, collapse, but I forced myself into the bedroom and slammed the door. The pounding outside intensified, shaking the frame. Then came the footsteps overhead, heavy, purposeful, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I dropped to the floor, curling into myself as the cabin came alive around me. The pounding, the footsteps, the whispers threading under the door, the steady, rhythmic thud of something dragging across the roof. And beneath it all, a low hum, a vibration, a pulsing heartbeat that didn't belong to me or to the cabin. But beneath it, something older, something waiting, something waking. I stayed there all night, listening, trembling, forcing myself to breathe until the first faint light of dawn seeped across the floor. Only then did the cabin fall silent. Only then did everything retreat. Only then did I stand shaking, exhausted, hollowed out, and whisper into the empty room. What do you want from me? The cabin didn't answer. It didn't need to. I already knew. The morning after hearing my sister's voice was the first time I truly understood what the cabin was doing to me. It wasn't simply scaring me. It was peeling back every layer of my past, every grief, every regret, every wound I'd buried, and placing each one directly in front of me like tools laid out on a surgeon's tray. Weapons. The cabin used memories as weapons. As the sun rose over the clearing, I stood in the kitchen staring at the pale light dripping through the blinds. My hands were still trembling. My shirt clung to my back, cold with sweat from a night where I'd barely dared to breathe. And yet, somehow, daylight always came. Quiet, soft, indifferent. The cabin felt different in the mornings, not comforting, but purposeful. Like it was resetting the board to start the game again. Rewinding the nightmare only so it could play out fresh. I poured water into a pot and set it on the stove. My movements were mechanical, instinctive. The silence around me buzzed. Not threatening, just waiting. Watching. As I stirred the coffee, my mind replayed the voice at the door. "Ethan, I can see you. Let me come home." I squeezed the spoon until my knuckles burned. I could still hear her tone, fragile, pleading, familiar enough to shatter the strongest part of me. That wasn't Claire. It couldn't be. But the truth clung to me like damp clothes. It knew her voice. It knew her laugh. It knew her pain. It knew my pain. And that meant it could reach deeper. The coffee boiled over, hissing onto the burner. I jolted from my thoughts, pulled the pot off the heat, and took a shaky breath. I had two options: let the cabin break me, or break the cycle before it consumed anyone else, most of all Melissa Bell. The backup heir Gabriel had mentioned. I had to understand the rules, not blindly obey them, not simply fear them, but understand them. I grabbed the journals again, flipping through entries with a new urgency. Most were rants, observations, or warnings. But here and there, buried like seeds in the soil, were pieces of something resembling truth. Not full explanations, just glimpses. Guardians are chosen through blood. The attic is the weakest point. The basement is sanctuary when entered by choice. They cannot enter unless invited. The forest will return you. But one line, repeated across journals from different decades, hit me hardest. The cabin tests the mind before it tests the body. I closed the journal and rubbed my temples. My mind. That's what it wanted. Not just fear, but emotional exhaustion. Vulnerability. It wanted me cracked open. Because a guardian who breaks early cannot protect anything. I needed to stay ahead of that. Not by hiding, not by running, but by knowing. I stood, suddenly fueled by a determination I hadn't felt since arriving. I grabbed the keys and approached the attic stairs, not to enter, but to face the door again in daylight. The attic door stood at the top of the narrow staircase, heavy and old, with a brass lock built into the wood. The lock had no keyhole, something I hadn't noticed in the dark. It was sealed, perhaps not meant for human hands at all. I reached up and placed my fingertips lightly against it. Cold radiated through the wood instantly. A shocking, unnatural cold that bit my skin like dry ice. I jerked my hand away. A whisper, not a voice, not a word. Just an impression slid through the back of my mind. Not yet. My breath caught. I staggered back down the stairs, heart pounding. I needed answers, and the attic wasn't where I'd find them. Not yet. So I turned to the only other place the cabin seemed reluctant to reveal. The hidden room beneath the basement. My stomach tightened at the thought of going down there again. The basement was quiet now, still as a pond, but silence in this cabin meant nothing. It meant the cabin was listening. Still, I forced myself to go. The air grew colder as I descended the steps. The basement lights flickered on reluctantly. My breath fogged in front of my lips. The journals remained on the desk, exactly as I'd left them, stacked neatly, almost reverently. I moved past them toward the old wooden door I'd seen the night before. This time, something felt different. The air around it pulsed faintly, like heat shimmer but cold. The door itself looked older, more weathered, the wood grain warped in patterns that almost resembled eyeless faces. I swallowed hard. "What are you hiding?" I whispered. My hand hovered over the handle again. It was warm this time, not feverish, not burning, but warm like skin. I pulled my hand back in shock. This door wasn't just a barrier, it was alive. But I had to understand the cabin. I had to know why it kept guardians here, why it forced them to witness familiar faces begging for entry, why it kept the attic sealed, why it created illusions so powerful they twisted grief into obedience. I needed the truth. And the truth lived behind this door. Even if it frightened me to my core, I had no choice but to try. I grabbed the handle and pushed. This time, it opened. The room beyond was dim, lit only by a single oil lantern hanging from a hook in the ceiling. The walls weren't stone like the rest of the basement. They were lined with thick wooden beams carved with symbols. Not drawings, not writing, symbols. Angular, spiraling shapes carved into the wood. Deep grooves filled with a dark, almost tar-like resin. The carvings pulsed faintly in rhythm with the lantern flame. As though they breathed, I stepped inside slowly. Books and scrolls lined the shelves in messy piles, some bound in cracked leather, others wrapped in cloth. Papers littered the table in the center of the room. Maps, diagrams, sketches of the forest, the cabin, the attic. But the one thing that caught my attention sat at the far end of the room. A large wooden chest. Its lid was carved with the same strange symbols. The edges were bound with iron. A heavy lock sealed the front. I approached, my footsteps echoing faintly off the carved beams. My fingers tingled as I got closer. Not with cold this time, with heat. A heat that pulsed like a heartbeat. I knelt in front of the chest, running my fingers along the symbols. They vibrated beneath my skin. The lock didn't have a keyhole. Instead, there was a shallow indentation, a palm-shaped groove. I felt my breath hitch. A bloodline lock. This chest was designed to open only for someone connected to the family, someone like Gabriel, someone like me. But why would Gabriel hide something like this from his journals? Why hide a lock tied to blood? I hesitated. The cabin always required a choice. Daylight choices felt safer, but they weren't always harmless. If I placed my hand in that groove, there was no guarantee the chest would open. Maybe the symbols would burn me. Maybe the chest contained something worse than anything I'd seen yet, something the cabin wanted me to unleash. I stared at the palm-shaped indentation for a long time. Then I placed my hand inside it. Nothing happened at first. Then heat spread through my palm and up my arm like warm water. The indent glowed faintly beneath my hand. The lock clicked, and the chest opened. I pulled my hand back quickly, my heart hammering as the lid creaked open on its own. Inside the chest lay a stack of documents, wrapped in cloth. I unwrapped them with trembling hands. They weren't journals. They were letters, hundreds of them, each one written in different handwriting, on different paper, from different decades. Some on modern lined sheets, others on yellowed parchment, some torn, some stained. And each letter began the same way. To the next guardian. A cold shudder rippled through me. I opened the one on top, written in hurried strokes. If you're reading this, it means you're trapped. I was too. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. The cabin is not evil. It is not good. It is a wall, a dam, a cage. The thing it holds back must never break through. My hands tightened around the letter. More lines followed. It will test your mind first. It will use your grief. It will use your memories. It will use your face someday, but never open the attic. Because the thing inside it, my eyes paused on the next sentence, is not what comes to the door. It is what controls them. My vision blurred. I grabbed another letter, and another, and another. Each one warned the same thing. The attic is the origin, the core. The basement is sanctuary. The forest is a loop, a maze built by the cabin. The cabin does not choose guardians. The entity does. And then, in one letter written in a trembling, desperate hand, it doesn't want you to protect the world from it. It wants you to feed it. I stepped back, nearly dropping the papers. The cabin creaked above me, as if reacting, breathing, shifting, listening. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my teeth. Everything was wrong. The rules weren't meant to protect me. They were meant to keep it fed. My breath shook. I backed away from the chest, from the letters, from the pulsing symbols on the walls. Then I heard something, a whisper at the top of the basement stairs. Not a voice, a sound. Soft, slow, deliberate. Footsteps. Coming down. I froze. The cabin had never done this during the day. I held my breath, every muscle tightening. The footsteps grew louder, descending one step at a time. Then, they stopped, just beyond the door. Silence. Then a soft, almost curious knock. Knock, knock, knock. I didn't move. The voice that followed wasn't familiar. It wasn't human. It wasn't imitating anyone I knew. It was calm, smooth, gentle. "Ethan," it said. "It's time we spoke." Ethan. Just one word. One quiet, controlled word spoken through a door made of old pine and iron hinges. Yet it carried a weight that nearly forced my knees out from under me. It wasn't like the voices I'd heard before. It didn't mimic anyone. Didn't pretend. Didn't beg. Didn't cry. It wasn't trying to trick me with familiarity. This time, the cabin didn't bother with illusions or borrowed faces. This was something else. Something original. Something real. My breath hitched as the voice continued, still soft, still impossibly calm. "You've read enough now to ask the questions that matter." A cold tremor passed through me, deeper than fear, something more like recognition, like part of me had always known this moment would come. I took one silent step back, careful not to make the floorboards creak. The lantern on the table flickered, casting shifting shadows across the carved walls. The letters inside the chest rustled as though brushed by a breeze that wasn't there. My voice barely formed a whisper. "What do you want from me?" The thing behind the door seemed to smile. I could feel it, even without seeing it. "You're beginning to understand." Good. Every instinct screamed for me to run deeper into the hidden room, to curl behind the desk like a child hiding from thunder. But something stronger held me in place. Not courage. Not curiosity. Pressure, like the air around me thickened, pushing me toward the sound instead of away. "You opened the chest," the voice said. "You read the letters. That means you're ready. And I've waited so long." My stomach twisted. "I didn't open it for you," I said, louder than I expected. "I opened it because I need answers. And I am offering them." Its calmness unsettled me more than any scream could have. Like it had all the time in the world. Like it had watched generations of guardians make the same choices, ask the same questions, walk the same path. "Walk upstairs, Ethan." The voice lowered slightly. "Let's speak properly." My blood ran cold. "No," I whispered. "Not going up there." A soft chuckle slipped through the wood, quiet but unmistakable. "I'm not in the attic right now. If I were, you'd already know." A pause. "But I could be, if you'd prefer that." A wave of nausea rolled through me. The footsteps in the attic from the previous nights, the pacing, the running, the pauses directly above my bed flashed through my mind. The very thought of willingly walking toward anything that lived up there made my muscles seize. "I'm not opening the door," I whispered. "You don't have to. Just listen." The silence inside the basement stretched until my pulse felt like thunder. Dust drifted from the rafters. The lantern flame steadied. Even the air soundlessly braced itself. "Do you know why the cabin brings you back when you try to leave?" The voice asked gently. My mouth was dry. "Because it wants a guardian." "No, the cabin doesn't want anything. It's wood, nails, stone, a vessel, a shell, a beat. I am the one who wants a guardian." My breath stilled. "You?" I whispered. "Yes." The air around the basement door pulsed, subtle but alive. Like the heartbeat beneath the cabin was closer now. "You humans misunderstand me," it continued. "You blame the cabin. You call it cursed, haunted. But I am not here to hurt you. I am here to protect your world from what lies above." "Above?" I frowned slowly. "The thing in the attic?" "That is only one piece," the voice murmured. A fragment, a shadow, not the whole. A chill crept across the floor and up my legs. Then what is the attic? I asked. What's really up there? Silence. Then, a doorway. The room tilted slightly, just a fraction, but enough to make me grip the edge of the table. A doorway to what? To wherever they come from, the voice said calmly. The ones who wear your memories, the ones who cry at your door, the ones who press their hands against your windows. They come from beyond the attic, and they hunger for what you fear. My heart hammered. You mean they're not ghosts? Not demons? Oh, Ethan, the voice whispered almost warmly. Your species has so many names for things it doesn't understand. I swallowed hard. Then what are you? Another long pause. You read the journals. You've seen the warnings. You've felt my presence in the walls. You've heard me in the floors. You've sensed me in your thoughts. A gentle exhale from behind the door. I am the barrier, the tether, the lock, the seal. My body went cold. You're the one holding them in, I whispered. Yes. Then why do you torment me? Why did you torment Gabriel? And the guardians before him? Because I cannot exist without a conduit, it said matter-of-factly. A mind, a memory, a life to anchor myself to. Without a guardian, the barrier collapses, the door opens, and everything behind it pours into your world. I stared at the shimmering lantern flame, my throat tightening. It wasn't torturing us because it enjoyed it. It was torturing us because it needed us. A living mind as a lock, a human life as a key, a guardian as currency, spent slowly over years. You feed on us, I whispered. Feed, the voice mused. Sustain, anchor, sacrifice. Choose whatever word comforts you. But yes, without a guardian, I fade. And when I fade, the attic breathes. My stomach churned violently. And what's behind the attic? I asked. What are they? When your kind looks into the dark, it murmured. You imagine monsters that look like you, faces, eyes, teeth. But what waits behind the attic has no shape, no form, no voice. Not until it uses yours. I felt sick. The voice lowered, almost tender. This is why you must remain here. Why all guardians must remain. You are not my prisoner, Ethan. You are my boundary. My hands curled into fists. And if I refuse? Silence stretched. Then, you won't. My heart slammed painfully in my chest. Because you already know something, don't you? The voice continued softly. You know you cannot leave. You know the forest will return you. You know the car will never start. You know your world will never let you return unchanged. My breath came shallow and broken. And, it added, you know what will happen if you try to force your way out. My voice shook. What? Another pause. When a guardian rejects their role, the attic calls their name. I staggered backward, gripping the table with both hands. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even emotional. It was stating a fact as casually as stating a temperature. The attic calls their name, and I had heard footsteps above me every night. My pulse roared in my ears. There is more you need to know, the voice said gently. Come upstairs. It is easier for me to speak with you when you're closer. The basement suddenly felt too small, too enclosed, the air too thick. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse faster. My instinct screamed to flee deeper into the hidden room. But the rational part of my mind, whatever was left of it, knew staying here wasn't safer. Not now. Not when the cabin itself had decided it was time for a conversation. I took a slow, trembling breath. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Each one felt like stepping out onto thin ice. At the base of the stairs, I paused. Ethan, the voice murmured, patient as stone. You cannot walk away from truth. I forced 1 foot onto the first stair, then the second, the third. When I reached the top, the basement door stood closed, the knob unmoving, the wood still. No figure waited behind it. No shadow seeped beneath it. No presence pressed against it. But the cabin felt awake, wide awake, every board and nail, humming with quiet tension. My fingers hovered over the knob. Then, a whisper slid across the room, so close to my ear I flinched. Good. Now, let me show you what you really inherited. My fingers hovered over the doorknob, trembling despite the morning light seeping weakly through the cabin windows. The voice at the basement had faded, but the room around me buzzed faintly, as though its echo still lingered in the grain of the wood. Let me show you what you really inherited. The words pressed against the inside of my skull, whispering, urging, pulling. Every instinct screamed to retreat back down the stairs, to barricade myself behind the chest and the carved walls. But something more rational, some thread of survival woven into my bones, forced me to stay still, to breathe, to think. The cabin had shifted. The rules had changed. The quiet daylight wasn't safety anymore, it was merely a pause between two choices. Run from the truth, or face the thing that held the attic sealed, the forest in loops, the basement pulsing with forbidden knowledge. I gripped the doorknob. The metal pulsed faintly beneath my palm, warm, alive. When I pulled the door open, the cabin greeted me with a stillness so absolute it felt staged. The living room was unchanged, books scattered where I'd dropped them, the couch slightly crooked, morning light stretching long across the floor. Yet everything felt posed, expectant, like the entire house had turned its face toward me. I stepped into the living room, each footfall echoing too loudly. A thin frost clung to the edges of the windows. Outside, the clearing looked washed in pale light, as though the sun itself was cautious about entering this place. My breath trembled out in a small cloud. "All right," I whispered to the empty air. "I'm here. You said you wanted to talk, so talk." Nothing responded, but the air tightened subtly, like the pause before a whisper or the inhale before a story begins. A soft creak broke the silence. Not from the attic, not from the basement, from directly behind me. I turned sharply. A shape stood in the hallway, tall, unmoving, silhouetted by the dim light behind it. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I thought the cabin had finally revealed whatever wore voices in the night. But the shape didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't reach for me. It was a man, or rather a carving of one. A wooden figure stood in the hallway, about my height, carved from pale birch that looked freshly cut. Its limbs were jointed crudely, its torso blocky and unfinished. But its face, its face was carved with delicate precision. It wore my features. Not perfectly, but close enough to make my stomach drop. I stared at it for a long moment, unable to speak. Its eyes were nothing more than carved hollows, but they seemed to follow me, shifting subtly with the tilt of my head. "What are you?" I whispered. The air behind me rustled, not wind, but something moving in a room that had no doors open. My shoulders tensed. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The voice spoke again, but not from the hallway, not from the figure, not even from the attic. It spoke from everywhere. "You are the vessel, the anchor, the shape I must learn." I swallowed hard, eyes still locked on the wooden effigy carved with my likeness. "What does that mean?" I asked, my throat dry. "You wonder why they wear your memories," the voice said. "Your grief, your faces. Why the ones at the threshold know your sister's voice, your lost love's laughter, your friend's secrets." My breath hitched. "It is because they learn from me," it continued calmly. "And I learn from you." I took a step back. "You're studying me?" "Yes." "Why?" A soft sigh rippled through the cabin walls, as though the thing behind the voice was tired from centuries of explaining itself to stubborn humans. "To survive." Its tone held no malice, no threat, only inevitability. "I exist to contain them," it said, "but I can only do so if I understand the mind I tether to. The fears, the memories, the losses. Each guardian offers a new shape to fill, a new boundary to reinforce." I felt sick. "So I'm… what? A template?" "You are the lock," the voice corrected gently. "Your life, your memories, your identity, these form the barrier I weave. Without that, the attic opens." My gaze drifted slowly to the ceiling. The attic door seemed to pulse faintly, as though reacting to the thought. "And if the attic opens," I whispered, "everything behind it spills into your world." A shudder ran down my spine. The wooden figure in the hallway clicked softly as its joints shifted, though it didn't move forward or backward. That thing with my face, I said. Why is it here? It is unfinished, the voice replied. I have begun learning your shape, your mind, your role, but your acceptance is incomplete. I stared at the wooden effigy, heart pounding. You're creating a copy of me. Yes. Why? To replace you when your role ends. My mouth went dry. Replace me how? I whispered. When a guardian dies, the voice said, their imprint remains within the cabin, their memories, their voice, their fears. What you call apparitions are echoes of previous guardians, attempting to fulfill a duty they can no longer carry physically. The words hit me like a blow. So the things that came to my door, the faces they wore, are they? No, the voice cut in, gentle but firm. Those are not guardians. Those are intrusions, fragments of what lies beyond the attic. But the faces they mimic, the voices they borrow, come from the imprints left behind. My skin crawled. So the cabin absorbs us, I said softly. Not consumes, it corrected. Preserves. For what? For continuity. My pulse hammered. You're turning me into part of this place. A pause. Yes. My breath faltered. The wooden effigy's head tilted slightly as though hearing the words too. My chest tightened, thoughts spiraling too quickly to control. How long? I asked. How long before that happens? Time does not pass the same way here, the voice replied. Some guardians last years, some decades, a few only days. My stomach dropped. Why days? I whispered. Those who resist the truth, it said. Those who cling to the world outside. Those who deny their inheritance. A heavy silence settled. So if I accept, I can survive longer? Yes. And if I refuse? A soft sound rippled through the cabin. A shiver of wood, a tremor of floorboards, a hum that came from deep beneath the foundation. If you refuse, the voice said in a whisper so thin it barely existed, the attic will claim you. My body went cold. The footsteps above me, those relentless, pacing, curious footsteps echoed through my memory. The nights when the pounding grew violent. The nights when the house shook. The nights when something paused directly above my bed, listening for my breath. What is in the attic? I asked again, voice barely a breath. You are not ready. My hands clenched. I need to know. You will. When the time comes. I shook my head, stepping back. No. I want to know now. The cabin's walls groaned faintly. You misunderstand your role, it said. Your purpose is not knowledge, it is endurance. Guardians guard. They do not explore. But I'm not just a guardian now, I whispered, staring at the wooden figure. You're trying to make me your replacement, your shape, your boundary. Yes, then I deserve answers. Silence. For a moment, I thought the cabin had withdrawn, that the voice had vanished into the walls, that the conversation had ended. Then softly, reluctantly, very well. The wooden figure in the hallway shuddered once its limbs twitching, as though strings had been pulled. The overhead boards creaked, and the cabin whispered, the attic holds the breach, the place where their world touches yours. What lives there is neither alive nor dead. It cannot be seen without seeing you in return. My breath caught. You asked what you inherited. It continued. You inherited the duty to keep that breach sealed, to ensure what presses against the attic door never steps into your world. A colder tone slid beneath the words. But you also inherited something else. What? I whispered. The air stilled. The wooden figure slowly turned its head toward me. You inherited the choice, the voice said, to be the last guardian or the one who ends the line. I stared at the effigy, unable to move. What does that mean? It means, the voice said quietly, that Melissa Bell will not survive this place. And if she fails, the attic opens. My heart stopped. I stepped backward, pulse exploding in my ears. No, I said. No. She doesn't even know she doesn't deserve. That is why this decision belongs to you, the voice said calmly. If you reject your role and leave this place without accepting your inheritance, the cabin will summon the next of your bloodline, and she will die. My breath fractured. But if you accept your role fully, she will never be called. I felt dizzy. So I either stay here, I whispered, and become whatever you're turning me into. Yes. Or someone else takes my place and dies. Yes. The cabin fell silent. The wooden effigy's hollow eyes stared back at me, unblinking and patient. Waiting, the voice spoke one final time, softer than breath. This is the truth you wanted, Ethan. Now choose. The word choose echoed through the cabin like a tolling bell, low, resonant, final. It vibrated through the beams, slid beneath the floorboards, and pressed against my chest until it felt like the air itself held me in place. Choose. I stood frozen in the center of the room, unable to breathe, unable to think clearly. The wooden effigy with my face watched from the hallway, unnervingly still, like a witness waiting to record the decision I made. My decision. It was absurd, impossible that my life had narrowed to this fork. But the cabin didn't care about impossibility. It didn't care about grief or logic or fairness. It cared about survival. Its survival. The world's survival. The boundary. If I accept, I whispered, barely able to hear myself over the pounding in my ears. What exactly happens to me? The cabin didn't speak immediately. The silence had weight, like it wanted me to feel the gravity before it confirmed anything. Finally, you become what all guardians eventually become. Memory, presence, shape. A tether woven into the walls. A living seal. My throat tightened. You mean, I lose myself? You change, the voice corrected gently, and your change holds the breach closed. You remain, in a way, but not as flesh. My vision blurred. Panic rose like a choking tide. And if I refuse, Melissa Bell, the cabin said softly, will be summoned by blood. My knees nearly buckled. Melissa Bell, my distant cousin, someone who'd never once heard of this cabin, who lived a quiet life teaching art in Portland. She was innocent, unaware, the kind of person who didn't deserve even a single second in this nightmare. She's not built for this, I whispered. She wouldn't last an hour. That is correct. My stomach twisted painfully. The effigy made another faint clicking sound, its wooden joints adjusting, its head tilting as though it were studying my reaction with inhuman patience. It was a half-finished version of me, a shell waiting to be filled, waiting for my acceptance, waiting to become the vessel of whatever would remain of me after the cabin devoured the rest. I won't condemn her, I said. Not for something she doesn't even know exists. The cabin responded with what sounded disturbingly like approval. Then you are closer to the truth than all who came before you. I swallowed hard. Closer to what truth? That you were always the one meant to remain. A cold wave rippled through the room. No, I said. No, don't twist this into destiny. I didn't choose this. Gabriel didn't tell me anything. He didn't prepare me. He tried, the voice said evenly. You did not listen until you arrived. I didn't know. You did not want to know. The accusation struck harder than expected. The lantern in the hallway flickered. The wooden effigy shifted minutely, as though leaning forward. I never asked for this, I said through clenched teeth. Neither did any guardian, it replied. Your resentment is natural. It is also meaningless. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. No, I'm not giving up my life. I'm not becoming some ghost locked inside a wall to keep your monsters at bay. The cabin didn't respond right away. Then the voice lowered. You misunderstand the stakes. A pulse traveled through the house deep, like a heartbeat. When one guardian rejects their inheritance, it said slowly, the attic breathes deeper. My chest tightened. What does that mean? It becomes curious, the voice whispered. It grows hungry. It reaches. The ceiling above me creaked loudly, violently, as if something slammed against it from the other side. Dust drifted down in a thin cloud. The effigy jerked its head, snapping it toward the sound. The cabin seemed to vibrate. What's happening? I asked, backing away from the center of the room. You are taking too long. The footsteps overhead returned, but this time, they weren't pacing. They were running, fast, heavy, directly toward me. The attic door thudded. Once, twice. A third time, harder. My pulse exploded. No, 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 no. I stumbled backward. You must choose, the voice said again, more forcefully now. Your refusal is breaking the boundary. The attic door shuddered violently, as if something hurled itself repeatedly against the other side. A thin crack spidered across the frame. Wood splintered. The cabin groaned deeply like a ship's hull, beginning to fail under impossible pressure. Stop! I shouted at the ceiling, as if my voice mattered. The noise stopped instantly. Silence. Too sudden. Too complete. I froze, barely breathing. Then, a whisper from directly above my head, not through the ceiling, through the boards. Ethan. The voice was wrong. Wrong in pitch. Wrong in tone. Wrong in every way a voice could be wrong. It wasn't imitating anyone. It wasn't disguising anything. It was the raw sound of hunger. The cabin's voice sharpened. You cannot face what is in the attic. It is not ready for you, and you are not ready for it. A violent tremor shook the beams above me. You must choose now. I pressed both hands against my skull, squeezing hard as if that could slow the flood of panic. I just need time, I whispered. I just need time to think. You have none, the voice replied. The attic door slammed so hard the entire cabin shook. A bolt snapped. A hinge screeched. Another crack tore through the wood. Something was coming through. No, no, stop, what do I do? What do I do? The wooden effigy stepped forward for the first time. Just one step, but it moved. On its own, toward me. My throat closed in terror. Stay back. It didn't obey. The cabin spoke again, suddenly calm. Accept what you are meant to be, and the door will seal. Reject it, and the thing in the attic will take your place. I don't want this, I yelled. The effigy took another step. Its hollow eyes held no emotion, yet somehow felt full of expectation. A crack split the attic door. A pale hand, if you could call it a hand, slid through the gap. Fingers too long, too thin, ending in shadow rather than nails. My scream caught in my throat. The cabin's voice pressed hard into my mind. This is your inheritance. I'm not ready, I shouted. No guardian ever is. I stumbled back into the hallway, my back hitting the wall. Tears blurred my vision as the attic door split wider. A face began to emerge. Not a human face, not even a mimic. A distortion of form, a mouth where no mouth should be. Eyes that were holes punched into nothing. The effigy reached out toward me. The attic creature reached out toward the door. My heartbeat hammered once, and I broke. I accept, I screamed. The cabin exhaled. A deep, resonant sound rolled through the walls like thunder. The attic door snapped shut so violently the floor shook beneath my feet. The pale hand vanished. The crack sealed over as though the wood healed itself. Silence. The wooden effigy froze mid-step, its arms still reaching toward me. Its hollow eyes dimmed. Its joints slackened. Everything stopped. Everything waited. I collapsed to my knees, sucking in air like a drowning man. My hands shook uncontrollably, my vision blurred with tears, rage, fear, shame, all tangled so tightly I couldn't tell one from the other. I accept, I whispered again, weaker this time. I accept. I accept. The cabin replied with a sound like a heartbeat deep beneath the floorboards. Good. I wiped my face with trembling hands. What happens now? I whispered, barely able to speak. You survive, the voice murmured, and the world stays safe for one more day. The wooden effigy slowly lowered its arm, its head bowed forward. Waiting? Listening? Learning? And tomorrow? I asked, shakily. The cabin let a long silence stretch before answering. Tomorrow, it said gently, you begin to become what you were meant to be. I didn't sleep the night after I agreed to become the cabin's next guardian. Sleep didn't feel possible, not after what I'd seen, not after what I'd nearly let break through that attic door, and definitely not after hearing myself scream I accept, like a man falling from a cliff who finally understands the ground is the only ending left. But it wasn't adrenaline keeping me awake. It was the quiet. For the first time since I arrived at the cabin, It was truly, absolutely, impossibly still. No footsteps in the attic, no whispering from the tree line, no basement door easing open with patient, hungry intent. Even the wind had stopped. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. You will learn to appreciate silence, the cabin's voice told me as I braced myself against the kitchen counter, palms sweating, legs shaking. No, I whispered. This isn't silence. This is waiting. The air shifted, as if the house inhaled. That is correct. I ran both hands through my hair and forced myself to look around. The living room was still a wreck, splintered boards and broken hinges where the attic creature nearly broke through, the wooden effigy still standing in the hallway like a forgotten puppet. Is it over? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Nothing is over, the voice replied. But the night has passed, and you survived it. That is more than many guardians can say after their first reckoning. I swallowed hard. Reckoning? That was a test? It was an introduction. I wanted to scream all over again, slam my fist into the wall, rip the boards apart, run into the woods, and keep running until my lungs burst. But there was nowhere to go, no one to scream to, no one to blame who would listen. The cabin was the only thing here. The cabin, and me. So what happens now? I asked. If I accepted, what changes? You begin the process. What process? To become part of the boundary. My chest tightened. I'm not dying. I'm not letting myself turn into one of those things you left in the walls. You are not dying, the cabin said calmly. And what you call those things were once guardians who broke under pressure, abandoned their role, tried to flee, tried to deny what they were becoming. I felt the room tilt. You're telling me those figures, the ones I see in the corners, sometimes the ones that whisper, they are what happens when a guardian resists but remains alive. My stomach lurched. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. So what do I become? I asked. Something different. The voice softened, almost gentle. You will keep your mind, your will, your humanity, but they will not stay anchored to flesh. I'm not, my voice cracked. I'm not ready for that. Readiness is irrelevant. Purpose is all that matters. The dread inside me expanded until it felt like a living thing clawing at my ribs. Please, I whispered. Just tell me how long I have. A long silence answered. Finally, it depends on you. My head snapped up. On me? How? Your acceptance will stabilize the barrier. If you resist, the process accelerates. If you try to escape, the attic will wake. And if you break, I won't break. The cabin paused, then spoke in that ancient, quiet tone that made my skin tighten. All guardians break at some point. The question is whether they break early, or break when the world can endure it. I shivered. Why me? I whispered. Why this bloodline? Why does it matter? The cabin answered instantly, as if it had been waiting for centuries to speak these words. Because your line is bound to the breach. Your ancestor opened it. My breath left my body in a sharp, painful burst. What? Over 180 years ago, a man named Elias Carterbell, your great-great-great-grandfather, found this land. He saw the clearing, heard the voices, followed the shadows, and he carved a door where there was none. He opened the boundary. That can't be true, I whispered. I would have known that. Someone in my family would have known. Your family hid it from themselves. Humans protect themselves with forgetting. But forgetting does not break a bond. I stumbled back into a chair, gripping the armrests so hard my knuckles whitened. He didn't mean to, I said. He didn't. No one would do that on purpose. Correct. He did not mean to. But intention does not erase consequence, and consequence is all the breach understands. I covered my face with both hands. So now I pay for his mistake. You are not paying, the cabin said. You are repairing. And you are the first of your line in many decades to accept willingly. I let my hands fall. Gabriel didn't accept willingly. Gabriel nearly broke the first week. But he stayed. He held the boundary longer than any guardian in the last 3 generations. A wave of grief dragged through me so suddenly it nearly knocked the air from my lungs. So he died here, I whispered. Alone, in pain, keeping something out that the world will never even know exists. The cabin didn't answer. It didn't need to. The truth sat heavy in the air. I forced myself to stand. I want to see his journals. You will. But there is something you must do first. What? The kitchen lights flickered once, then again. The temperature dropped sharply, cold enough that my breath fogged in the air. The boundary must recognize you. How do I make it recognize me? You must go to the threshold. My pulse spiked. No, absolutely not. The threshold is in the attic. Yes. Then I'm not going. You accepted your role, the cabin replied. Acceptance requires demonstration. No, I am not opening that door. You do not need to open it. You must stand before it. I shook my head violently. No, you saw what happened. You saw what was coming out. You saw what it almost did. And it stopped when you accepted. The attic does not harm guardians who have aligned themselves. It only tests those who resist. It tried to take me. It tried to claim you because you refused your purpose. And now that I've accepted, I said, pacing backward, you expect me to stand in front of that door like some sacrifice? Not a sacrifice, a seal. My stomach twisted. And what exactly happens when I stand there? You will see, the cabin murmured. No, I said again. Tell me first. You will feel the boundary. Feel it how? You will feel what it is to hold the breach closed. I stared at the ceiling at the boards that hid the thing that had stalked every night of my captivity here. And if I don't do it, then the breach will not recognize you. The attic will test you again tonight. Harder. My voice rasped out. Would it kill me? No. It would break you until you accepted in agony instead of clarity. And you would begin the transformation immediately. I shut my eyes. Why are you doing this to me? I am not doing anything to you, the cabin said softly. You are doing what your blood owes. I felt the old anger flare again, but it died almost instantly. I was too exhausted, too hollowed out, too aware that the cabin wasn't threatening me out of cruelty. It was simply stating truth. Fine, I said hoarsely. Fine, I'll go. The cabin didn't speak again. It didn't need to. It had gotten what it wanted. I walked toward the staircase, the one that led to the small landing just before the attic door. My legs felt too light, too weak, like they weren't fully mine. The cabin floorboards creaked under my feet, though they hadn't made a sound all night. It felt like the house was watching. As I reached the stairs, the wooden effigy turned its head ever so slightly to follow me. I froze. Its eyes' empty carved sockets were fixed directly on me, as though waiting to see whether I would obey. You said it won't harm me, I whispered. It will not, the house replied. I didn't know whether the cabin was telling the truth, but I climbed anyway. One step, another, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Near the top of the staircase, the air grew colder, heavier, denser, like wading through invisible weight. When I reached the landing, I stood before the attic door. It was silent, still, waiting. My breath came fast, ragged. I'm here, I whispered. What now? A low hum rose from behind the door, a vibration so deep it rattled the floor under my feet. Then, something touched the other side. Something aware, something enormous, and I felt it turn its attention toward me. Something pressed its awareness through the attic door. I didn't hear it, not at first. I felt it. A pressure, a shift, a presence so massive it made the air thicken, made my skin prickle, made my instincts howl at me to run, flee, vanish. But I didn't move, couldn't. Every step of the staircase behind me felt too small, too fragile, compared to the force that now waited behind the wooden barrier inches from my face. Ethan, the cabin whispered, its voice vibrating through the walls. Do not look away. Not now. I'm not opening the door. You will not need to. The hum on the other side turned into a slow, rhythmic pulse, deep, resonant, like the heartbeat of something that wasn't shaped by the rules of our world. My breath fogged in the cold air. A wind defying logic moved through the house, whispering upward, funneling around me, as though pulled toward the attic door. "Why is it doing this?" I whispered. "Because it sees you," the cabin said, "and because it must learn your shape." My shape? For the boundary to bind to you fully, the breach must know what it is being anchored to. The vibration intensified. Something scraped along the other side of the wood, not clawed, not human, something like many things moving together in a single layered motion. My throat tightened. I'm not ready for this." No answer came. A slow, warping groan rolled through the attic door as it bowed inward, not breaking, not opening, simply bending toward me as though someone pressed a hand, or many hands, against it from the other side. Then I heard it. A voice. But not in any language I knew, not even a language. A murmuring chorus of tones and shapes and sounds that felt like emotion before comprehension, like fear, curiosity, recognition. "It is speaking to you," the cabin said. "I don't understand. You are not meant to. You are meant to endure." The murmuring deepened. The wood vibrated beneath it. My ears rang. My eyes watered. My knees nearly buckled. "Enough," I gasped. "Enough, please." Yet even as I begged, something in me sensed this wasn't an attack. It was acknowledgement. A slow, powerful acknowledgement. And then, as suddenly as it had come, the vibration softened. The pressure eased. The murmuring dimmed into a low, steady resonance. "It accepts you," the cabin said. The attic door flattened, returning to its proper shape, smooth, unbroken, unmoving. The cold air receded. My breath steadied. "What does that mean?" I whispered. "What happens now?" "It means the boundary recognizes your presence. From this moment forward, the breach will not test you the same way it tests the unaligned." "And what does that mean?" I repeated, voice trembling. "It means you will survive." I let out a long, unsteady breath. My legs gave out, and I sank to the landing, sitting on the cold wood, leaning back against the railing as every muscle in my body trembled. "I thought it was going to tear through," I whispered. "It would have." The cabin answered simply, "If you had not accepted." I rubbed my hands over my face, trying to steady myself. "So, I'm really doing this," I said. "I'm really the next guardian." "Yes." "For how long?" "The better you learn the rules, the longer you endure. Decades are possible." "Decades," I echoed, numb. "Yes. And at the end, even if I succeed, I become part of the cabin. You become part of the boundary. There is a difference." I stared down at my shaking palms. "A difference that matters?" "To me," the cabin said, "and to the world." The strange thing was, by that moment I believed it. Every piece of terror, every impossible encounter, every force I'd felt clawing at the edges of reality over the past days, it all fit into place. "What about Melissa?" I asked, the name catching painfully in my throat. "Will she still be called here someday?" "No," the cabin said. "Not unless you fail. If you endure, she will live her life untouched." Relief crashed through me so suddenly I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath for hours. "Good," I whispered. "Just tell me, please tell me I won't become one of those things in the walls." "The broken guardians?" the cabin asked gently. "No, Ethan. Not if you continue to choose purpose over fear." I nodded slowly. I could work with that. I could live some version of living with that. A long quiet fell, deep but no longer heavy. The cabin wasn't watching me now. It wasn't testing me. It was simply being. And in that quiet, something in me loosened for the first time in days. A small, fragile sliver of stability. "We must begin," the cabin said softly. "There is much to learn." "What's first?" I asked. "The journals," it answered. "Your uncle wrote more than you have read, and older guardians left knowledge far beyond what he understood. And after the journals, then begins the training." "Training?" "Yes. Tonight you will learn to walk the perimeter." My stomach tightened. "What happens on the perimeter?" "The breach touches the edges there," the cabin explained. "Not with forms, but with intention." That doesn't sound reassuring. It is not meant to be. I exhaled shakily. "What else?" "You will learn the difference between what knocks on the door and what whispers under the floor." "What?" "Whispers under the floor. You will learn. And after that?" "After that," the cabin said, You will learn how to speak back. A chill rippled through me. You mean communicate with those things? With the boundary itself, the cabin corrected. With the force your ancestor awakened. That sounds like something I'll regret. Regret is irrelevant, the cabin replied gently. Purpose remains. I leaned back, staring at the cabin's ceiling, now silent, unbroken, calm. I'll do what I can, I whispered, but I can't promise I'll be perfect. No guardian has ever been perfect, the cabin said, only present. I stood slowly, gripping the railing for support. My legs steadied, step by step, as I descended the staircase. The wooden effigy still stood in the hallway, but something was different about it now. Its posture was less tense. Its head bowed slightly, not in threat, but acknowledgement. Will that thing follow me forever? I asked. No, the cabin said. It is only a vessel for what you may become someday. For now, it is dormant. I'd prefer if it stayed that way. It will. Back in the living room, the morning light, thin but warm, filtered in through the boarded windows. The cabin seemed lighter than it had since I first arrived, as though it, too, had finally exhaled. What happens tonight? I asked quietly. You walk the perimeter, the cabin repeated. Then you endure whatever comes. And what comes? A long silence followed. When the cabin finally spoke, the voice held something like sorrow or warning, something older than names, something that has watched every guardian since the first, something that hungers. I swallowed hard. Will I survive it? Perhaps, the cabin answered. I closed my eyes. Let the truth settle. Let the weight find its place inside me instead of crushing me. I can do this, I whispered. Yes, the cabin murmured. You can. And one day, when my time is done, someone else won't be dragged here unwillingly. Because I was the one who stayed. Yes, the cabin said. And that is why you were chosen. I nodded once, slow, steady. Okay then, I said. Show me Gabriel's journals. Let's start. The house shifted just an inch like a nod of approval. And as I stepped deeper inside, a single understanding settled fully into my bones. I was not just surviving the cabin, I was becoming it. They say every place with a past will eventually speak its truth. What they never tell you is, sometimes the truth speaks back. For weeks now, I've lived inside these walls, learning the weight of a legacy I never asked for, carrying the burden of a door that can never be opened, listening to the hum of something ancient just inches beyond the veil. And somewhere along the way, the cabin stopped feeling like a stranger. It started feeling like a heartbeat I had to protect. There are nights, quiet nights, when I hear the echo of Gabriel's footsteps, not haunting me, but guiding me, reminding me that he once walked this same lonely path, breathed this same cold air, stood guard when the world outside slept peacefully, unaware of the darkness that pressed patiently at the edges of its dreams. I used to think strength meant running towards something better. Now I understand it also means staying where you're needed, even when the world forgets you, even when no one will ever know your name. Tonight, as I stand at the edge of the clearing, staring at the tree line where shadows gather but never cross, I feel something I haven't felt since the day this nightmare began. I feel purpose, not because I'm chosen, not because I'm special, but because someone has to stand here, and I'm still standing, and maybe that's enough. If you're watching this, if my voice is the only proof I ever existed, remember this much. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to stay when running feels easier. Sometimes it's choosing responsibility over regret. Sometimes it's guarding a world that will never know it needed guarding. I don't know how long I'll last here. Days, months, years. But I know this. As long as I'm breathing, as long as these hands are steady, as long as the boundary holds, nothing on the other side will ever reach you. And if someday, long after I'm gone, you find yourself standing in a clearing in British Columbia with a strange key in your hand and an even stranger letter with your name on it, I hope you hear this message. I hope you feel it. I hope you understand. You won't be alone, not really, because I'll still be here, somewhere in the beams, in the floorboards, in the heartbeat of the cabin, watching over the dark, so the world can stay in the light. And maybe, just maybe, that's what it means to be a guardian.